My son laughed when I said I wanted to go skydiving. I came back the owner of a beach house valued at $950,000. I never thought the cruelest laugh of my life would become the sound of my freedom. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. You'll be helping me continue to unburden myself. My name is Eleanor Morales. I'm 63 years old, and I live in a small suburb of Chicago, Illinois. Well, I lived, because now I don't know where I belong anymore. This morning, I woke up as usual at 5:30, in the small utility room my son Julian lent me 4 years ago. It has no window. It smells of detergent and dampness. My bed is a thin mattress on a wooden frame that creaks every time I move. The wall is cold against my back, and I can hear the constant dripping of the utility sink faucet that I can never quite close all the way. I got up slowly, because at this age, my bones ache more on cold January mornings. I put on the same blue plaid bathrobe I've worn for 3 years, the one I bought at a flea market back when I still had my own little house. That robe has coffee stains and small holes I've sewn over and over, but it's the only thing that reminds me of who I was before I became the lady who helps out. I walked barefoot to the kitchen, stepping on the cold tile floor that Laura, my daughter-in-law, always scolds me for not cleaning well enough. I turned on the stove and put the griddle on for the pancakes. The sound of the gas burner igniting is the first thing this house hears every morning, because I'm the one who makes breakfast for everyone. Julian, Laura, and my 2 grandchildren, Dylan, who is 12, and Sophia, who is 8. As I whisked the pancake batter, my wrinkled hands moved with the memory of 50 years of the same routine. But today, something was different. Today marked exactly 4 years since I sold my little bungalow in Lincoln Park to help Julian with his debts. 4 years since I moved into this undignified room. "It'll just be temporary, Mom," he had told me then, with that smile he inherited from his father. "Just until we get on our feet." 4 years later, I was still waiting for that moment to arrive. I made scrambled eggs, bacon, and coffee from the drip machine, just how Julian likes it. I set the table with the Fiestaware plates I bought when I got married over 40 years ago, the only ones I was allowed to bring because they matched the decor. The rest of my things were left in a storage unit that Laura considered unnecessary and too old. At 7 o'clock sharp, like clockwork, I heard Julian's heavy footsteps coming down the stairs. My eldest son, 38 years old, an industrial engineer, with his shirt always perfectly pressed because I get up an hour early to make sure of it. His shoes shine because I polish them every night while he watches TV. His lunch is packed because I start preparing his food at 5:30 in the morning. "Good morning, honey," I said with that automatic smile I've perfected after years of walking on eggshells. He grunted something like a greeting, grabbed his coffee, and started scrolling through his phone. Not a glance. Not a, "Thanks for getting up early." Not a, "How are you this morning?" Nothing. Just the sound of his fingers tapping the screen while I served his plate. Laura appeared minutes later in a pink silk pajama set, her hair perfectly styled even though she had just woken up. At 35, she works in a government office and has always made me feel that my presence in her house is a barely tolerated nuisance. "Eleanor, you forgot to wash the dishes from last night," she said without even a good morning, pointing to the sink where there were exactly 2 plates and a glass. 2 plates that she and Julian had used after dinner, when I had already shut myself in my room because they needed privacy to talk. "I'm sorry, Laura. I'll wash them right now," I replied, wiping my hands on my stained apron. "It's just that it's always the same thing, Eleanor. I always have to remind you," she continued as she poured coffee into the special mug I gave her for her birthday, a hand-painted porcelain one I bought with my savings for the month. The kids came running down, their school uniforms half on, and their backpacks slung over their shoulders. Dylan, who's in middle school, gave me a quick hug. "Morning, Grandma. Did you pack my ham sandwich?" "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, handing him his lunch packed in a brown paper bag. Sophia, who is shyer, came over and gave me a kiss on the cheek. She's the only one in this house who still sees me as a person, not just a useful piece of furniture. After breakfast, my daily routine began. Wash the breakfast dishes, clean the kitchen, make the beds, vacuum, dust, do the laundry, hang it up, prepare lunch, wash more dishes, iron, clean the bathrooms, prepare dinner, serve, wash more dishes, and finally, at 10 at night, when everyone was in their rooms, I'd retreat to mine. No salary, no day off, no recognition. But today, while folding clean laundry in the utility room that is now my home, I found something unexpected. A letter. It was tucked between Julian's shirts, as if someone had put it there on purpose. The handwriting was familiar, old, and shaky. For Eleanor Morales, the yellowed envelope read. It was from Mrs. Lydia Clark, an 87-year-old woman I worked for as a caregiver over 20 years ago, when my children were small and I needed extra money for their school fees. Mrs. Clark lived alone in a huge house in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and I would go 3 times a week to help with housekeeping, shopping, and mainly to keep her company. With trembling hands, I opened the letter. It was dated 2 months ago. My dearest Eleanor, it began in that elegant script I remembered from her shopping lists. If you are reading this, it is because I have gone to be with the Lord. I want you to know that you were more than a caregiver to me. You were the daughter I never had, the companion I needed, the kindness the world denied me. My eyes filled with tears. I remembered her soft hands asking for help to comb her hair, her stories about her youth in Europe, the afternoons we spent watching soap operas while she knitted scarves for the children in town. That is why, the letter continued, I have decided to leave you my beach house. Yes, Eleanor, the house in Sarasota, Florida, where you always said you'd love to spend your final years. It is yours now, all yours, with a garden, an ocean view, and most importantly, with the freedom you deserve. The letter fell from my hands. A house. On the beach. For me. For the first time in 4 years, I truly smiled. I sat there on the floor of the utility room, Mrs. Clark's letter in my trembling hands, as memories of the last 20 years flashed through my mind like pages of a painful photo album. I remembered when Julian was just 18 and came home crying because he had crashed the car. Not just any car, but the used Honda Civic I had bought with my savings from 5 years of working at Mr. Henderson's diner. My only asset, my only way to get to work. Mom, I'm so sorry, he had said that night, his eyes swollen. I ran a red light at a busy intersection. The other car is totaled. They're going to sue me. They're asking for something like $20,000. I was making maybe $1,500 a month waiting tables from the crack of dawn. $20,000 was what I could earn in 2 years. If I didn't eat, didn't pay rent, didn't exist. But he was my son. My firstborn, the boy I held in my arms when his father left us, the one who cried on my shoulder when other kids made fun of his worn-out shoes. I sold my house, the little 2-bedroom bungalow in a nice neighborhood, where I had planted roses in the yard and hung the framed photo of my mother that she gave me before she died. I sold it for $80,000, practically giving it away, because I needed the money fast. I gave Julian the $20,000 for the lawsuit. With the rest, we moved to a smaller apartment by the train tracks, and Julian continued studying engineering as if nothing had happened. He never paid me back. He never even talked about it. When I brought it up, he'd say, "Oh, Mom, are you seriously going to charge me? I'm your son." Parents make sacrifices for their kids. It's natural. 5 years later, Julian married Laura, a pretty girl from a well-off family who worked for the state, and who, from day one, made me feel like a third wheel in her boyfriend's life. "Julian is a married man now, Mrs. Morales," she told me on their wedding day, while I was in the kitchen helping serve the guests. "He doesn't need you hovering over him all the time, but he did need me when Dylan was born. Laura had a C-section, and someone had to take care of the baby, cook the meals, and clean the house. Who else but his mother? I moved in with them for a few weeks. The weeks turned into months. The months turned into years. First in the guest room. Then, when Sophia was born, they moved me to the utility room because the kids need their space. During all those years, I kept working. Weekdays at the diner, Saturdays cleaning houses in the suburbs, Sundays babysitting for the neighbors' kids. All to help with the household expenses, because we all have to pull together, as Julian would say. My entire paycheck was gone before I saw it. I bought the kids' diapers, the formula when Laura couldn't breastfeed Sophia, the school uniforms, the supplies, the shoes. When Dylan turned 8, he wanted a bicycle for Christmas. I worked double shifts in December to buy it for him. "Thanks, Grandma," Dylan said when he saw it under the Christmas tree. But Julian and Laura let the boy believe it was a gift from Santa Claus, not from his grandmother who had worked late nights at a garment factory to get the extra money. Last year, when Laura wanted to remodel the kitchen, she came to my room one night. "Eleanor, we need a favor," she said, perching on the edge of my narrow bed. "We want to replace the kitchen cabinets, put in granite countertops, change the backsplash. But it's so expensive. How much do you need?" I asked, though I already knew what was coming. "About $8,000. I know you have some savings, since you hardly spend anything on yourself." It was true. I had saved, penny by penny, for 3 years. It was my emergency fund in case I got sick, in case I needed medicine, in case one day I couldn't work anymore. But that's for when I can't work anymore, Laura. "Oh, Eleanor, you're perfectly healthy. Besides, it's your kitchen, too. You'll benefit from it as well. And don't worry, when Julian gets his end-of-year bonus, we'll pay you back." I gave them the $8,000. The kitchen turned out beautiful, with new wooden cabinets and a granite countertop that shone like a mirror. Laura would invite her friends over for coffee to show off the remodel. "It cost us a fortune, but it was worth it," she'd tell them. Julian worked extra to get the money. She never mentioned it was my savings. And Julian's bonus went toward a family vacation to Hawaii. "For the family," they said. But I was left behind to watch the house because someone has to stay. Now, sitting on the floor with that letter in my hands, I added up everything I had given over the years. The house I sold, $80,000. The savings for the kitchen, $8,000. The monthly money for expenses, close to $200,000 over 20 years. The hours of free labor, incalculable. And never, not once, had they thrown a party for my birthday. They had never taken me out to dinner for Mother's Day. They had never asked me what I wanted for Christmas. Last week, on my 63rd birthday, I waited all day for someone to wish me well. I baked my own German chocolate cake, Julian's favorite, thinking maybe he'd take the hint. I put 63 candles on it that I'd secretly bought at the corner store. During dinner, as everyone ate my cake, I tried to join the conversation. "You know, I've always wanted to go skydiving," I said suddenly, looking for their eyes. "Ever since I was young, I'd see people jumping in movies and think it must feel like flying." The silence lasted for an eternity. Then, Julian let out a laugh. A loud, mocking laugh. "You? Mom? You can't even climb the stairs without your knee hurting. What do you want to do that for?" Laura laughed too, covering her mouth with her napkin. "Besides," Julian continued, "you've had your life. You've traveled. You've done what you wanted to do. Now it's our turn." My eyes filled with tears, but I kept smiling, always smiling. "When did I travel?" I asked in a low voice. "Oh, Mom, don't exaggerate," Julian replied without looking up from his plate. But I had never traveled. I had never left Illinois, except for one trip to Michigan for my sister's funeral. I had never slept in a hotel, never seen the ocean, never eaten in a nice restaurant just for pleasure. That night, as I washed the dishes from my own uncelebrated birthday celebration, I saw my reflection in the kitchen window. I saw a 63-year-old woman, stooped, with hands wrinkled from so much washing, with poorly cut gray hair because I cut it myself in front of the bathroom mirror. A woman who had given her entire life so that others could be happy. And for the first time in years, I asked myself, when is it my turn? Now, with Mrs. Clark's letter in my hands, it seemed my turn had finally come. But something scared me. Something I couldn't shake. What if they got angry? What if Julian thought I was being selfish? What if Laura said that at my age, I didn't need my own house? What if they were right? Over the next few days, I kept Mrs. Clark's letter like a burning secret between my ribs. I hid it inside my Bible, between the pages of the book of Job, because it seemed fitting. Every time I touched it, my hands trembled as if I were touching something forbidden. But life went on as usual. The same routines, the same invisibility, the same small wounds that accumulate like a leaky faucet in the soul. On Tuesday, while I was making lunch, Laura walked into the kitchen talking on the phone with her sister Monica. "No, sweetie, we just don't know what to do with her anymore," Laura said, thinking I couldn't hear her because my hands were busy chopping tomatoes. "She gets weirder every day. Yesterday I found her looking at old photos and crying, and then she comes out with this thing about wanting to go skydiving. Can you imagine?" She laughed loudly, a laugh that echoed off the tiled walls. "Julian says it's her age. That old ladies get like that, a little crazy, but I'm worried she's losing her mind. The other day, she couldn't remember where she'd put the car keys." I remembered perfectly. The keys were where Laura always left them, thrown on the dining room table with her work papers. But when she couldn't find them, she automatically assumed it was my fault. "The good thing is she won't be working at the diner much longer," Laura continued, lowering her voice as if it were a state secret. "Mr. Henderson told me last week he's closing up shop. His kids don't want to take it over. So Eleanor's going to be out of a job." My knife stopped mid-tomato. Mr. Henderson hadn't said anything to me, but Laura already knew. And she spoke of my future as if it were the next day's weather forecast. "She'll be here all day, with nothing to do but get in the way." Just imagine. When Laura hung up, she carried on as if nothing had happened. She didn't ask if I'd heard. She didn't ask how I felt knowing I was about to lose my job. She just took an apple from the fruit bowl and left, leaving me with a racing heart and trembling hands. Wednesday was worse. I came home from my shift at the diner with my knees aching after 8 hours on my feet, and found Laura in the living room with 3 of her friends from work. They were all drinking coffee from the good cups, the porcelain ones I wash by hand because they're too delicate for the dishwasher. "Eleanor," Laura shouted from the living room, "can you bring us some more cookies? The ones on the top shelf of the pantry?" I quickly changed my clothes and went to serve the guests. As I arranged the cookies on a plate, I heard one of them, Rochelle, ask Laura, "So, how's your mother-in-law? Doesn't it bother you having her live here?" "Well, we're actually looking into what to do," Laura replied in a low voice, but not so low that I couldn't hear. "She's just getting so old. The other day, she burned the chili on the stove and almost set the kitchen on fire. And she's always forgetting things." It was a lie. The chili had burned because Laura had asked me to run to the store for milk for her friend's coffee. And by the time I got back, all the liquid had evaporated. "Oh, that's so tough," another friend said. "My mom had to put her mother-in-law in an assisted living facility last year. She felt guilty at first, but now she says it was the best decision." "Yeah, we've been thinking about it too," Laura replied. "There are some really nice facilities here in the suburbs. They're not cheap, but they have activities to keep the elderly from feeling lonely." When I brought in the cookies, they all fell silent. They smiled at me with those fake smiles people give when they've just been talking about you. I put the plate on the coffee table and retreated to the kitchen, but I heard them resume their conversation as soon as I was in the hallway. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay on my thin mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, thinking about what I had heard. An assisted living facility. They wanted to put me in a home. I pictured myself in a small room, smaller than this one, but filled with other old people whose families didn't want them either. I pictured myself eating watery oatmeal and watching TV all day, waiting for visitors who would never come. On Thursday, Julian came home from work early. I heard him talking to Laura in the bedroom with the door closed. But the walls in this house are thin. "I already spoke to Ramirez at the office," Julian was saying. "His dad is in a facility in Schaumburg that's not bad at all. He says it costs about $3,000 a month, but it includes meals, laundry, and even doctors." $3,000 isn't so bad," Laura replied. "Between what she helps with from the diner, and if we sell some of the stuff she has in storage, we can totally afford it." "Yeah, and honestly, we need the room. The kids are growing up, and Dylan needs his own space. He's 12 now. Besides," Laura added, "she's not the same. I find her talking to herself sometimes. And yesterday I saw she put the bread in the refrigerator. That's not normal." I put the bread in the refrigerator because there were ants in the pantry, but it didn't matter. They had already decided I was losing my mind. "What I feel bad about are the kids," Julian said, his voice feigning concern. "They'll miss their grandma, but it's for the best. For everyone. Even for her. She'll be better cared for. Better cared for. As if I were an old piece of furniture that needed maintenance." Friday was my day off from the diner. But I didn't rest. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, washed and ironed all the clothes, and prepped food for the weekend. All in the hope that maybe, if I did everything perfectly, if I was useful, if I didn't cause any trouble, they would change their minds. But that afternoon, while I was folding laundry on the patio, I heard Laura on the phone again. "Yeah, we're going to see the facility tomorrow," she was saying. "Julian says it's better to do it without her knowing, so we don't upset her. You know how old people get when they feel like they're going to lose their space. My space. A windowless utility room was my space. The good thing is she doesn't have much stuff. One small suitcase will do," Laura continued. "Oh, and I think she has some money saved up. But Julian says we can use that for the moving expenses and the first few months." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. They didn't just want to get rid of me. They wanted my meager savings, too. That night, after serving dinner and washing the dishes, I sat on my bed and took out Mrs. Clark's letter. I read it again, slowly, savoring each word like it was fresh water in a desert. "With the freedom you deserve," the letter said. "For the first time in 4 years, maybe for the first time in my life, someone thought I deserved something." I stood up slowly and walked to the small mirror hanging on the wall. I looked at myself. Really looked. I saw a 63-year-old woman who had spent her entire life caring for others, serving others, sacrificing for others. A woman who had allowed herself to be treated like a useful piece of furniture, but who now had a chance. A house on the beach. A home of my own. A place where no one could tell me I was in the way, that I was crazy, that I needed to be cared for. I took a deep breath, like when you're about to jump into cold water. Tomorrow I would tell them the truth. I would tell them about the inheritance. And then I would see what this family that claimed to love me was really made of. I put the letter back in my Bible, but this time I placed it in the book of Exodus. It seemed more fitting. Saturday dawned overcast, as if even the sky sensed what was about to happen. I got up earlier than usual, at 5 a.m., not out of obligation, but because I hadn't been able to sleep. My stomach was in knots. My palms were sweaty, and my heart was beating like it was trying to escape my chest. I made breakfast as usual, scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh brewed coffee with cinnamon, but this time, as I stirred the eggs in the skillet, I rehearsed the words I was going to say. I had repeated them 1,000 times in my head during the night. "I have something important to tell you." No, that sounded too dramatic. I received some news. Too simple. Mrs. Clark left me something in her will. That was good. Direct, but not aggressive. At 7 o'clock, Julian came down the stairs in his perfectly pressed white shirt. As always, he sat in his spot at the table without saying good morning, grabbed his coffee and started checking his phone. Laura appeared minutes later, already wearing makeup, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She looked especially put together for a Saturday. "Are you two going out?" I asked as I served the plates. "We have a few errands to run," Julian replied without looking up from his phone. Work stuff. A lie. They were going to see the assisted living facility. But I already knew the truth. The kids came running down as always. Dylan in his Chicago Bears t-shirt, and Sophia in her little pink dress. She came over and hugged me like she did every morning. "Good morning, Grandma. Did you make me pancakes?" "Not today, sweetie, but I saved you the best piece of bacon," I said, stroking her hair. I didn't know if this would be the last breakfast we'd share. I waited until they had finished eating. I waited until Laura had checked her messages. I waited until Julian stopped pretending to read the news on his phone. I took a deep breath and wiped my hands on my apron. "I have something important to tell you," I said finally, my voice as steady as I could make it. Julian looked up for the first time all morning. Laura stopped her coffee cup midway to her mouth. The children kept eating, oblivious to the tension that was starting to build in the kitchen. "What's wrong, Mom?" Julian asked in that tone he used when he thought he was about to have to deal with one of my problems. "Last week I received a letter. From the lawyer of a Mrs. Lydia Clark, remember her? The lady I worked for years ago in Lake Geneva." Laura frowned. "The rich old lady with the big house on the lake?" "Yes, her. It turns out, well, she passed away 2 months ago." "Oh, that's a shame," Julian said automatically, with that expression of false sympathy people use for a tragedy that doesn't affect them. Yes, but the thing is, my voice trembled. She left me something in her will. Now I had their full attention. Laura put her cup down on the table with more force than necessary. Julian sat up straighter in his chair. She left you something? Like what? Laura asked, and for the first time in years, I heard genuine curiosity in her voice. She left me her beach house, in Sarasota. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Laura opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Julian blinked several times as if he were processing information too complex for his brain. What do you mean she left you a house? Julian finally asked, with a mix of disbelief and something else I couldn't immediately identify. A house on the ocean, I continued, feeling something strange in my chest. Was it pride? With a garden, 3 bedrooms, and, well, the lawyer says it's valued at around $950,000. Laura choked on her coffee. Literally. She started coughing, and Julian had to pat her on the back. $950,000? Julian repeated, his eyes wide. Are you sure? It's not a mistake? I took the letter out of my apron pocket and placed it on the table. They both lunged for it like starving people pouncing on a plate of food. I watched them read, their eyes darting across the lines, their expressions changing from disbelief to amazement, from amazement to something that was starting to look like greed. Oh my God, Laura whispered. It's real. It's a real house. Mom, Julian said, and his voice sounded completely different, softer, more affectionate than it had in years. This is incredible. Do you know what this means? I knew what it meant for me. Freedom, dignity, a place where no one would tell me I was in the way. But apparently, Julian had other ideas. It means you don't have to worry about the future anymore, he continued, taking my hands with a tenderness he hadn't shown since he was a boy. We can sell the house, invest the money wisely. With that kind of money, you can live comfortably for the rest of your life. Or we could put it in the family's name, Laura added quickly, with that smile she used when she wanted to convince me of something. So that it's legally protected. You know how these things are, Eleanor. Sometimes older people become victims of fraud. There it was. It hadn't taken them 5 minutes to start planning what to do with my inheritance. It's not for sale, I said softly. What do you mean it's not for sale? Laura asked, the artificial sweetness from a moment ago completely gone. I mean, I'm not going to sell it. I'm going to go live there. Another silence. But this one was different. This one was electric, tense, promising a storm. Mom, Julian said, and now his voice had that forced patience used with children or people who aren't thinking clearly. You can't live alone in Sarasota. It's so far away. What will you do if you get sick? If you need help? I've lived 63 years taking care of myself. I think I can manage. But it's not practical, Laura exploded. It's $1 million house. Think about the kids, their future, their education. Yeah, Mom, Julian added, getting up from his chair and starting to pace the kitchen. Dylan's going to be in high school in a few years. He'll need money for college. And Sophia, too. With that money, we could secure their future. And what about my future? I asked. Your future is secure, Laura yelled, losing her composure completely. You live here, with your family, cared for and protected. What more do you want? I was quiet for a moment, looking at this woman who had made me feel like a burden for 4 years, and who was now talking to me about protection. I want my own house, I said finally. I want to wake up when I want. I want to cook whatever I feel like. I want to walk barefoot in the garden if I please. That's selfish, Laura shouted, slamming her palm on the table. Pure selfishness. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I repeated, feeling something hot rise in my throat. Like what? We gave you a place to live, Laura continued. We gave you food, a roof over your head, a family. I gave you $80,000 from the sale of my house, I said, standing up as well. I gave you $8,000 for the kitchen. I've given you my entire salary for 4 years. I've worked as your unpaid maid. And what have you given me? We gave you love, Julian shouted. The word hung in the air like a lie too big to support itself. Love? I asked, and my voice came out more broken than I expected. Is that what you call planning to put me in a nursing home without even asking me? They froze. Laura's face went visibly pale. We didn't, Julian stammered. I heard you, I continued. I heard you talking on the phone. I heard you planning to use my savings to pay for my own exile. Laura collapsed into her chair as if her strings had been cut. Eleanor, I can explain, she started to say. There's nothing to explain, I interrupted. I understand everything perfectly now. I took the letter from the table, folded it carefully, and put it back in my apron. I'm moving to Sarasota next weekend. And without another word, I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them speechless with the bitter taste of truth in their mouths. The next few days were like living in a war zone. The house was filled with an electric tension, with whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room, with stares that followed me as if I were a criminal who had stolen something that didn't belong to me. On Sunday, Julian didn't come down for breakfast. Neither did Laura. I made my own scrambled eggs, ate alone, and washed my own plate. The silence was so thick I could hear the ticking of the living room clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even my own breathing. Around 10 in the morning, while I was watering the plants on the patio, I heard raised voices from the master bedroom. I didn't have to strain to hear. They were yelling, "Your mother has lost her mind." It was Laura's voice, hysterical. $1 million, Julian! $1 million! And she wants to go live alone like she's a 20-year-old. I know, Julian replied, his voice tired. But we can't force her. Of course we can. She's your mother. You're the son. You have to make the decisions. And what do you want me to do? Take her papers? Tie her up? Do something. Talk to a lawyer. There has to be a way to prove she's no longer competent to make major decisions. I froze. They wanted to declare me mentally incompetent. They wanted to take my inheritance using the law. Laura, my mom's not crazy, Julian said. But his voice didn't sound very convincing. Oh, really? A 63-year-old woman who's never lived alone, who barely knows how to drive, who wants to run off to the beach like she's a teenager isn't crazy? There was a long pause. Then Julian's voice sounded different, colder. You know what? You're right. I'll talk to Mr. Herrera tomorrow. See what our options are. I felt a chill run down my spine. My own son, my first baby, the one I held when he had colic, the one I nursed when he had pneumonia at age 5, the one I defended when teachers said he wasn't very bright. My own son wanted to have me declared insane to steal my only chance at happiness. On Monday, Julian left earlier than usual. I have an appointment before work, he told Laura. But he ignored me completely, as if I were a ghost. Meanwhile, Laura switched tactics. She suddenly became the most attentive daughter-in-law in the world. Eleanor, my love, she said when I came down for breakfast. Pour me some coffee, will you? And sit here with me. We need to talk. Her voice was syrupy sweet, artificial. What do you want to talk about, Laura? About your future, sweetie. About this impulsive decision you're making. She sat next to me at the table, something she hadn't done in years. Eleanor, I know that sometimes you felt, I don't know, maybe unappreciated here, and it hurts me so much to think that. I stayed silent, waiting to see where this performance was going. The truth is, Julian and I have been talking, and we realize that maybe we haven't shown you enough how much we value you. Oh, really? Of course. You're the foundation of this family, Eleanor. Without you, none of this would work. It was incredible how she could say that with a straight face after 4 years of making me feel like a burden. That's why, she continued, taking my hands, we want to propose something. What if we remodel the utility room? We can make it bigger, put in a window, your own bathroom. It would be like your own little apartment. I stared at her. Did she really think she could buy my inheritance with a window? And also, she went on quickly, as if afraid I'd interrupt, we could give you a salary. Let's say $300 a week for helping with the house with the kids. Doesn't that sound fair? $300 a week. To work from 5 in the morning until 10 at night. To have no life of my own. To remain invisible. And all I'd have to do is stay here and forget about the beach house? I asked. Exactly. And look, Eleanor, let's be realistic. You've never lived alone. You don't know how banks work or paperwork or taxes. $1 million house comes with huge responsibilities. What if you get robbed? Or scammed? Then you'd really be left with nothing. But I'd be safe here, I said, unable to hide the sarcasm in my voice. Exactly. Here you have a family that loves you, that protects you. Why risk all that for a whim? A whim. My dream of having my own home was a whim. Let me think about it, I told her, just to get her to leave me alone. Her eyes lit up. Of course. Take all the time you need. But not too long, okay? It's better to sort these things out quickly. That afternoon, after Laura left for work, her grandmother arrived. Carmen, an 80-year-old woman who had always treated me with disdain because she felt her granddaughter had married beneath her. But today she arrived with smiles and hugs. Eleanor, what a joy to see you. Laura told me the wonderful news about your inheritance. What a blessing. Thank you, Carmen. But she also told me about your idea of going off to live alone. And look, as an older woman myself, I feel it's my duty to advise you. Here came the sermon. Eleanor, dear, at our age, we're not cut out for adventures. I had to learn that the hard way when my husband died. At first, I wanted to stay alone in my big house, but my children convinced me it was better to be near family, and they were right. But you have your own house, I reminded her. Yes, but it's on the same street as my children. They can look after me. You, on the other hand, want to go all the way to Florida. Who's going to take care of you if you have a heart attack? If you fall and break a hip? It was the same speech as Laura's, just with more years of experience behind it. Besides, she continued, lowering her voice as if revealing a state secret, I've heard parts of Florida can be very dangerous. So much crime. Do you really think that's a place for a decent woman on her own? Fear. Now they were trying to scare me. That evening, the children were brought into the act. Dylan approached me while I was washing the dishes. Grandma, is it true you're leaving? Yes, sweetheart. And you're not going to live with us anymore? His little voice sounded sad. Genuinely sad. And for a moment, my heart broke. Dylan, do you know that I sleep in the utility room? Yeah. And you have your own bedroom? Yeah. Wouldn't you like to have your own house when you grow up? He thought for a moment. Yeah, but not far from my parents. I won't be that far. Florida isn't another country. You can come visit me. But who's going to make my sandwiches for lunch? And there it was. The real fear. It wasn't that they would miss me, but my services. Your mom can learn, I said gently, but yours taste better. Sophia came running and hugged my legs. Grandma, my mommy says if you leave, we won't be able to get new toys because everything will be too expensive. Laura had sent the children to manipulate me emotionally. Sophia, sweetie, your dad makes very good money. You won't lack for anything. But why do you have to go? Don't you love us anymore? I knelt down to her level. I will always love you. But sometimes grown-ups need their own space. Like when Daddy goes to work? Sort of. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat on my bed and made a decision. The next day, I would go to the bank and check my savings account. Then I would see a lawyer, one who wasn't Julian's. And on Friday, no matter what happened, I would take a bus to Sarasota. It was time to stop living for others and start living for myself, for the first time in 63 years. Tuesday dawned with a clear sky that felt like an invitation. I got up at 5:30 as usual, but this time I didn't turn on the stove. This time I didn't put out the griddle. This time I got dressed in my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought for Laura's cousin's wedding 2 years ago, and slipped out of the house without a sound. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't make anyone breakfast. The bank opened at 9, but I got there at 8:30 and waited outside, sitting on a bench in a downtown plaza, watching the city wake up around me. Office workers hurried by with their paper coffee cups, students with oversized backpacks, vendors setting up their newspaper and candy stands. It was a world that had always existed, but one I'd never had time to observe because I was always rushing from home to work, and from work to home, carrying grocery bags, thinking about what to cook, what to clean, who needed what. When the bank doors opened, I was the first one inside. Good morning, I said to the account manager, a young woman with glasses and a professional smile. I'd like to check on my savings account. Of course, ma'am. May I see your ID? I handed her my state ID and waited as she typed on her computer. Her expression changed slightly when she saw the screen. Mrs. Morales, I see your account has a balance of $4,320. It was less than I remembered, but enough for my plan. I'd like to withdraw $3,000, I said. $3,000 in cash. Yes? May I ask what you'll be using it for? It's just that for bank policy, with larger amounts, we need to document. I'm moving, I said simply. 30 minutes later, I walked out of the bank with $3,000 in my purse. For the first time in my adult life, I had my own money in my hands. Not money for household expenses, not money for someone else's emergency, not money that someone else was going to manage. My money. My next stop was the office of Mr. Miller, a lawyer I had found in the phone book just 3 blocks from the bank. His office was on the second floor above a pharmacy, and it had that look of modest honesty that inspired my trust. Mrs. Morales, he said after listening to my story, what you're describing is very common, unfortunately. Families trying to control the inheritances of their elders. He was a man in his 50s, with graying temples and hands that moved a lot when he talked. Can they take the house from me? Legally, no. The inheritance is in your name. You are of sound mind, and you have the right to do with your property as you see fit. But my son said he was going to talk to a lawyer. He could try to file for a conservatorship, meaning he'd try to prove you lack the capacity to make decisions. But he would need medical proof, psychological evaluations, witnesses. And from what I can see, you are perfectly sane. What do you recommend? That you take possession of the property as soon as possible. The longer you stay here, the more opportunity you give them to create problems. When can you travel to Sarasota? This Friday. Perfect. I can contact the lawyer who handled the will in Sarasota to have everything ready for your arrival. I left his office feeling more confident. I had money, I had legal advice, and I had a plan. But the hardest part was still to come. Going back home. When I arrived at 2 in the afternoon, the house was in total chaos. Laura was pacing the living room like a caged lion, talking on the phone. I don't know where she is. She just left without a word, without making breakfast, nothing. Julian was sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. There she is, Laura shouted when she saw me walk in. Where have you been? Taking care of my affairs, I answered with a calm that surprised even me. Your affairs? The kids came home from school and there was no lunch. I had to ask the neighbor to give them something to eat. And what's the problem? You know how to cook too. Laura's mouth fell open. I had never spoken to her like that. Mom, Julian intervened, getting up from the couch. We need to talk. I spoke with Mr. Herrera. I spoke with a lawyer too, I said, hanging my purse on the coat rack. Which lawyer? A Mr. Miller. He explained my rights to me very clearly. Father and son looked at each other. I saw something I had never seen on their faces before. Fear. Mom? What did this man tell you? Julian asked, trying to sound casual. He told me the house is mine, and I can do whatever I want with it. He also told me that any attempt to take it from me would be illegal. No one wants to take anything from you, Laura said quickly. We just want you to make the best decision. I already have. I'm leaving on Friday. You can't leave on Friday, Laura exploded. Saturday is Dylan's birthday. We already planned to have the party here. Then you have it. But he wants his grandma to be there. If he wants me there so badly, he can come visit me in Sarasota. For the next 3 days, the house became a psychological battlefield. Every meal was an interrogation. Every moment alone with me became a pressure session. Did you buy your bus ticket yet? Julian asked me on Wednesday during dinner. Yes. For what time? It leaves at 7 in the morning. Who's picking you up in Sarasota? A taxi. Do you know exactly where the house is? The lawyer is going to give me the exact address and the keys. Question after question, as if I were a child going away to summer camp for the first time. On Thursday night, Laura made her last desperate attempt. She knocked on my door at 11 o'clock. Eleanor? Can I come in? She was in her nightgown, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. Eleanor, please, don't leave like this. Don't leave angry with us. She sat on the edge of my bed and took my hands. I know we haven't been perfect. I know we've made you feel bad sometimes, but it's just, We don't know how to live without you." For the first time in 4 years, she sounded sincere. "This house will fall apart without you," she continued. "The kids will miss you horribly. Julian is devastated even if he doesn't show it." "Laura," I said gently, "you will all be fine. You'll learn to do things on your own, like any normal family." "But what if we can't? What if we mess it up completely? Then you'll learn from your mistakes. What if you regret it? What if Sarasota isn't what you expect?" For the first time since I received Mrs. Clark's letter, I felt a pang of doubt. What if she was right? What if I was too old to start over? What if I was making a mistake? But then I remembered the conversations about the nursing home. I remembered the years of feeling invisible. I remembered Julian's laugh when I mentioned skydiving. "Laura," I said, "I have spent 63 years living for other people. The last 4 years living in a utility room. I deserve the chance to try to be happy. Aren't you happy here?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Would you be happy living in a utility room, working without pay, with no one ever asking how you feel or what you dream of?" She didn't answer. "Laura, I'm not your enemy. I'm just a 63-year-old woman who wants her own home." She was quiet for a long time. Then she stood up slowly. "Will you give us your new address?" "Of course. Can we come visit you?" "Whenever you want." "Will you forgive us?" "There's nothing to forgive," I lied. "We just have to move forward." On Friday morning at 6, my suitcase was packed by the door. A single suitcase with the clothes I'd managed to buy with my diner wages, the few photographs that were truly mine, and Mrs. Clark's letter. Julian drove me to the bus station without saying a single word the entire way. At the station, he carried my suitcase to the bus door. "Mom," he said when it was time for me to get on, "take care of yourself. You too, honey. If you need anything, I'll be fine. Do you forgive me?" I looked into his eyes and saw the boy he had once been, the boy who cried when his father left us. "I already have," I said. And it was true. I had forgiven him, but that didn't mean I was ever coming back. I got on the bus, found my seat by the window, and watched Chicago grow smaller behind me. For the first time in 63 years, no one knew where I was at 7:30 in the morning. No one expected me to make breakfast, to wash dishes, to solve problems. For the first time in my life, the day belonged completely to me, and I liked the feeling. The bus ride from Chicago to Sarasota took over 24 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. Every mile that pulled me away from my old life was a mile that brought me closer to something completely unknown, something that was mine. Along the way, as the landscape changed from city to farmland, from mountains to coast, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had simply looked out the window of a vehicle without having to plan what to cook, what to clean, what time I had to be home. For the first time in decades, my mind was completely free of the mental checklist I always carried. Milk, bread, detergent, pick up the dry cleaning, call the plumber, buy the birthday gift for so-and-so. Now, I just saw palm trees. I just felt the air, growing more humid and salty, coming through the bus vents. I just heard the drone of the engine and the distant conversations of other passengers who, like me, were heading toward something new. We arrived in Sarasota in the afternoon. The bus terminal was small, surrounded by yellow cabs and vendors selling sodas and chips. The heat hit me like a warm slap when I stepped off the bus, but it wasn't unpleasant. It was the heat of life, of possibilities, of a place where nobody knew me as the lady who helps out. I gave the address to the taxi driver, a tan man in his 60s who whistled as he drove. "Ah, Mrs. Clark's house," he said when he saw the paper. "Are you a relative of hers?" "I was her friend," I replied. "She left me the house." "That's wonderful. That house has been empty since she passed. It's a shame because it's a beautiful place, right on the beach." During the 20-minute ride, the taxi driver told me about the neighborhood. Quiet families, a lot of retirees, a little market 2 blocks away that sold the freshest fish on the coast. "And if you'd like, ma'am, my wife makes the best seafood chowder in the area. Her name's Esperanza, lives in the greenhouse with the blue gates, 3 houses down from yours." When we arrived, I couldn't believe my eyes. Mrs. Clark's house was exactly as she had described it in her letter, but more beautiful than I had ever imagined. It was a two-story house, painted white with turquoise shutters, surrounded by a garden where purple bougainvillea, small palm trees, and plants I didn't recognize filled the air with a sweet tropical scent. But what took my breath away was what lay behind the house, the Gulf of Mexico, immense and sparkling under the afternoon sun, stretching out as far as my eyes could see. The Sarasota lawyer, a Mr. Davis, was waiting for me at the door with the keys and a kind smile. "Mrs. Morales, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Mrs. Clark spoke of you often in her final years." "Really?" "Yes. She always said you were the only person who treated her with genuine affection, not just because you were paid to." He handed me an envelope with the deeds, the keys, and information about the home's utilities. "Everything is up to date," he explained as he opened the front door. "Electricity, water, phone. Mrs. Clark specifically left funds to ensure you wouldn't have any trouble with bills for the first 6 months." The door swung open, and I stepped into my new life. The house was even more beautiful on the inside. White tile floors reflected the light pouring in from enormous windows. The living room was furnished with wicker furniture and cushions in shades of blue and white. A kitchen with an ocean view, where I could already picture myself making my morning coffee while watching the sunrise. But what moved me the most was the primary bedroom. It had a queen-sized bed with a mattress that looked both comfortable and firm, a vanity with a mirror, and most importantly, a huge picture window that looked directly out onto the ocean. "Is this going to be my room?" I asked the lawyer, barely able to believe it. "Of course, ma'am. It's your house. My room. My house." Words I had dreamed of, but never thought I'd be able to say for real. After Mr. Davis left, I sat alone in the living room on one of the wicker armchairs, just listening to the sound of the waves washing onto the shore, listening to the wind rustling the palm fronds, listening to the silence that wasn't filled with demands, complaints, or a to-do list. It was a silence filled with peace. That first night, I slept for 10 straight hours. 10 hours without waking up thinking I had to get up and make breakfast, without hearing footsteps in the hall, without worrying that someone might need something from me. I woke up on my own, when my body wanted to, at 8:30 in the morning. Through my bedroom window, the ocean was golden in the morning sun. I stayed in bed for 5 more minutes, simply because I could. When I finally got up, I walked barefoot to the kitchen and made coffee. Coffee just for me, in the exact amount I wanted, as strong as I liked it. I sat in the little breakfast nook overlooking the garden and drank my coffee, watching hummingbirds visit the bougainvillea flowers. I didn't have to talk to anyone. I didn't have to smile if I didn't feel like it. I didn't have to plan anything beyond what I wanted to do that day. I decided to explore the town. I put on a cotton dress I'd bought years ago but never had a chance to wear because Laura said it was too colorful for an older woman. I combed my hair in front of the vanity mirror, and, for the first time in years, I liked what I saw. I didn't see an invisible, exhausted woman who lived in a utility room. I saw a free woman. The little market was 2 blocks away, exactly as the taxi driver had said. It was small but bursting with color. Tomatoes redder than any I'd seen in a Chicago supermarket, fish so fresh it still shimmered, and tropical fruits I had never tried. "Good morning, ma'am." The woman at one of the stalls greeted me. "Are you new around here?" "Yes, I just moved in." "That's wonderful. We can always use new faces in town. Where are you from?" "Chicago." "Oh, the big city. You'll find it much quieter here. Have you had breakfast yet? I've got some mangoes that are just perfect." I bought mangoes, fish, fresh greens, and limes. The woman gave me some hibiscus flowers to make yourself a nice tea and cool down from the heat. At every stall, people greeted me with curiosity but without any rush. They asked questions, not to gossip, but to get to know me, to include me in their small community. On my way home, I ran into Esperanza, the taxi driver's wife. She was watering the plants in her garden. "Mrs. Eleanor," she called out from her gate. "Are you getting settled in at Mrs. Clark's house?" "Yes, very well, thank you. Have you eaten?" "I just made some fresh ceviche." Before I could answer, she had already invited me into her kitchen and served me a bowl of ceviche with tortilla chips. "Mrs. Clark always said that when you came to live here, I had to look after you like you were my own sister," Esperanza told me as she poured me a glass of iced tea. She said you were a good person. She talked about me? Of course. She said she'd met few people as noble as you, that you worked hard but always had time to listen to her to ask about her day. I was moved to tears. For all those years, I thought my work with Mrs. Clark hadn't meant anything special. I thought I was just another employee. It turned out I had meant so much to her that she had left me her most precious treasure. That afternoon, I walked on the beach for the first time in my life. 63 years old, and I had never walked on a beach. I took off my shoes and felt the warm sand between my toes. The water washed up to my ankles, cool and foamy, and for a moment I thought I was going to fall. But I didn't. I walked and walked, collecting seashells, simply because I wanted to. As the sun began to set, I sat in the sand to watch. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. It was the most beautiful show I had ever seen. And it was free. It was for me. It was mine. That night, as I prepared pan-seared fish just for myself, using the recipe I learned from watching my mother years ago, I thought about Julian and Laura. They were probably having takeout or a poorly made dinner, wondering how they were going to manage the routine without me. But for the first time, that thought didn't fill me with guilt. It filled me with, I don't know how to say it, pride? Satisfaction? For 4 years, they had made me believe that they couldn't function without me, but that they could only function with me if I disappeared into my utility room. Now they would find out if they truly needed me, or if they only needed my services. After dinner, I went out to the garden with a cup of chamomile tea. I sat in a wooden chair that someone had placed facing the sea and listened to the waves. For the first time in decades, I had nothing pending. No dishes to wash, because I had only used my own. No clothes to iron, because I only had on what I was wearing. No rooms to clean other than the one I had used. I just had time. My time. Time to think. To feel. To be. And I realized something that filled me with a joy so deep I could hardly contain it. I was happy. For the first time in my life, I was completely, utterly happy. 6 months later, as I write these words sitting on my terrace watching the sunrise over the Gulf, with a cup of fresh coffee in my hands and the sound of seagulls as my background music, I can hardly believe that the woman who lived in that utility room and I are the same person. But we are. It's just that now I know who I really am. The first few days in Sarasota were like learning to walk again. I had to remind myself that I could have breakfast at 10 in the morning if I wanted, that I could stay in my pajamas until noon, that no one was going to scold me for not making the bed immediately or for leaving a plate in the sink until after lunch. Freedom, I discovered, also takes practice. Esperanza became my first real friend in decades. Not the kind of friend you have because you work together or live in the same house, but a friend you choose, you seek out, you miss when you don't see her. On Wednesdays, she teaches me how to cook types of fish I've never tried. On Fridays, we go to the market together and then sit in her kitchen drinking coffee and sharing stories about our lives. I found out she had also been a caregiver, but for her own in-laws for 15 years. The difference, she told me one afternoon, is that I knew it had an end date. They were going to pass away eventually. You thought you were going to be in that utility room until your last day. I also met Mr. Aurelio, a 70-year-old widower who lives alone in a little yellow house at the end of the street. It turns out he was an elementary school teacher for 40 years in Chicago, retired, and moved to Sarasota because he had given enough to others and wanted to give something to himself. We understand each other perfectly. On Sundays, Mr. Aurelio, Esperanza, her husband Ramon, and I get together on my terrace to play dominoes and watch the sunset. It's something so simple, so normal, but to me, it's extraordinary. For the first time in my life, I have friends who want my company, not what I can do for them. A month after I arrived, I signed up for swimming lessons at the local community center. The first time I got in the pool, the instructor, a young man in his 20s who could have been my grandson, asked if I was sure. "Ma'am, don't you think you're a bit, well, a little old to be learning to swim?" "Son," I replied, "I'm 63 years old, and I've just learned that it's never too late for anything. Now I swim for 20 minutes every morning. I'm not fast, but I get to the other side of the pool under my own power. And every stroke reminds me that I'm stronger than I thought." I also kept my promise to myself. Last month, for my 64th birthday, I booked a skydiving trip in St. Petersburg. Esperanza thought I had lost my mind. Eleanor, what if you get killed? Esperanza, I told her. I've lived 63 years not doing things for fear of dying. Now I'd rather die doing something that excites me. On the day of the jump, when the instructor asked if I was scared, I told him the truth. I'm more scared of going back to a life that isn't mine. Skydiving was exactly as I had imagined as a child, but 1,000 times better. The entire world was spread out beneath me, immense and full of possibilities. The wind embraced me like no one ever had, and when I landed on the beach, with sand in my shoes and my heart pounding like crazy, I laughed so hard that people stared. It was the laugh of a free woman. I've had news from Chicago, of course. At first, Julian called me every few days, then every week. Now he calls once a month, and our conversations are short but more honest than any we've had in years. How are things over there? I asked him on the last call. Tough, he admitted. Laura had to learn how to cook. The kids miss your food. The utility room has become a storage room because nobody wants to sleep in there. And how are you? There was a long pause. Mom, I need to tell you something. Go on. I need to apologize. For real. Not just for what happened at the end, but for everything. For treating you like you were, I don't know, like a piece of furniture. I already told you I forgave you. I know, but I needed to say it. And I need you to know that, well, you were right. We needed your services, not you as a person, and that's really wrong. It was the most mature conversation we'd had in years. You know what's weirdest? Julian continued. At first, I thought you had become selfish. But now I realize you had never been selfish a single day in your life, and maybe that was part of the problem. He was right. For 63 years, I hadn't known how to be even a little bit selfish. I didn't know it was okay to say no. I didn't know it was okay to want things for myself. I didn't know that taking care of yourself isn't vanity, it's survival. Dylan wrote me a letter a month ago. A real, handwritten letter that came in the mail. It said, Grandma, my mom helped me write this, but the words are mine. I want you to know that I do miss you, but I understand now why you left. My mom says that sometimes adults need their own space, and that it doesn't mean they don't love us. Can I come visit your house during summer vacation? I want to see the ocean, and I want you to teach me how to swim. I wrote back immediately. Of course he can come. I already have the guest room ready for him, and Esperanza knows she'll have to teach me how to cook for a kid again. But this time, because I want to. Not because I have to. Sophia hasn't written yet, but she's still very young. Julian tells me she asks about me and has a picture I sent of my house taped to her wall. She says when she grows up, she wants to have a house by the sea like her grandma. Laura? Well, Laura has never spoken to me directly, but through Julian, I know she finally got Dylan his own room. The room that used to be mine is now his. I'm glad. I always thought a 12-year-old boy needed his own space more than a grandmother needed a utility room. Last night, while eating grilled fish on my terrace and watching the stars, which are so much brighter here than in the city, I thought about everything I had to lose to find myself. My original house, my savings, years of my life, the relationship with my grandchildren, the security of the familiar. Was it worth it? Every morning when I wake up in my bed, in my room, in my house, with the ocean whispering good morning to me from the window, the answer is the same. Yes. 1,000 times. Yes. Because I discovered something that no one had taught me in 63 years. That I matter. That my dreams matter. That my happiness matters. And that I don't have to ask anyone's permission to live my own life. Now, when I look at myself in the vanity mirror that Mrs. Clark left me, I no longer see an invisible woman. I see a woman who learned to swim at 63, who went skydiving at 64, who has friends who seek her out just for the pleasure of her company, who eats breakfast when she wants and cooks what she craves. I see a free woman, and that freedom, that dignity, that joy of living for myself is priceless. It's worth more than $950,000. It's worth more than any family's approval. It's worth more than the comfort of the familiar. It's worth exactly what it cost. The courage to say no more and truly mean it. Today is Sunday. In a little while, my friends will arrive for our afternoon game of dominoes. Esperanza will bring her seafood chowder, Mr. Aurelio will tell his teaching stories, and Ramon will whistle while he shuffles the tiles. And I will be there, not because I have to serve anyone, but because I want to be, because I finally learned the difference between existing and living. And at 64 years old, I am just beginning to live. Have you ever experienced something similar? Do you know someone who had to choose between the comfort of being invisible and the courage to be free? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because maybe, just maybe, there's someone else out there who needs to hear that it's never too late to go skydiving. It's never too late to fly.